Today is a very special day because I'm finally opening a bottle I've been dying to try. It's a traditional method sparkling wine that has spent several months in the Atlantic Ocean, which brought me the idea for today's episode, where we're going to discuss some of the world's strangest wine cellars. Let's dive into it. Welcome back to the VINVERITY Show. When most of us think of a wine cellar, we think limestone wine cave or something cool and dark with stone walls and dusty bottles. But what if I told you that some wine cellars are in the ocean and on purpose? Inspired by the results of a shipwreck or a winemaker's intuition, let's dive into the impact of wines aged in the ocean and some other of the world's strangest wine cellars. So, while many cellars embody this image of a stone wall, dusty cellar, there are some remarkably interesting wine cellars in the world, and the results are fascinating. Important disclaimer here: not all wines are meant for aging. In fact, it's around under 2% of the world's wines that are actually suitable for long term cellaring. And that absolutely does not mean that wines destined for early enjoyment, let's say within 1 to 5 years, are of lower quality. They're often simply structured differently. Yes, it's true that many of the world's most famous wines are age worthy, but that does not encapsulate the whole picture. A wine's ability to age doesn't automatically make it better. It usually just means that the wine has a different balance. There are key factors that influence aging potential, including acidity, sugar, and tannin, but we'll get into that much deeper in a future episode. Now, that also doesn't mean that these early drinking wines don't benefit from being in proper cellar conditions for the short time they'll be kept in bottle, but you definitely don't want to be putting them to the depths of the ocean for several months to years. Now that we've gotten that out of the way, if you are going to age a wine, it's important that the conditions are ideal. Wine ages best in conditions that are cool, dark, stable, with minimal vibration and consistent humidity. Traditionally, caves and underground tunnels provided the perfect environment. They were nature's original climate controlled storage units long before electricity or refrigeration. People learned that the earth itself could protect their wines. And in some parts of the world, those underground spaces became enormous. In Moldova, there are wine cellars so vast that they have street signs and traffic lights. Milesti Mici stretches for more than 200 kilometers through former limestone mines, and you can drive through it. It's essentially a wine city beneath the earth, housing millions of bottles of wine. Nearby, Krikova is another labyrinth of tunnels where history, politics, and wine intersect. These are cellars that feel more like subterranean kingdoms than wine storage rooms. Elsewhere, there are cellars carved into volcanic rock or hidden inside mountains or built deep beneath castles. But even those aren't the strangest places that wine has been aged. Because eventually, someone asked a different question. If the earth makes such a perfect cellar, what about the sea? The ocean is cold, dark, stable, and it's under constant pressure. In many ways, the ocean mirrors the same conditions that winemakers to create artificially on land. And unlike a cellar, the ocean is affected by the tide, so there is a slow movement that can't be recreated elsewhere. Historically, this idea isn't as strange as it sounds. In fact, some of the most remarkable bottles ever discovered were found in shipwrecks. The Baltic Sea is famous for shipwrecks carrying wine bottles discovered by sea divers. One such discovery recovered champagne bottles that were over 160 years old from a sunken vessel, and they were astonishingly well preserved. The cold, darkness, and pressure of the sea had created a natural time capsule. So, discoveries like this changed how some people thought about wine storage. And it suggested a wine cellar that is both functional and really intriguing. Today, winemakers around the world have started experimenting with that idea on purpose. In Spain, bottles are aged in underwater caves. In Italy, wine is submerged near Portofino. In Greece, they have bottles that rest beneath the Aegean Sea. And in Chile and Argentina, cages of wine are lowered into the Pacific and Atlantic Oceans. And in Canada, one of the most fascinating experiments happened in Nova Scotia. Benjamin Bridge is a winery well known for precision and innovation, and they've gained international recognition for their sparkling wines made in the traditional method. They're creating wines in the champagne style using hybrid grapes as well as internationals like Chardonnay and Pinot Noir. So they began exploring what would happen if their flagship Champenois method wines were aged beneath the Atlantic, and the results were wonderful. Instead of resting quietly in a traditional cellar, they took some of their bottles and lowered them into the sea, secured in cages, and left at depth for months. Some winemakers believe that the ocean environment can soften texture, preserve freshness, enhance integration, and create a different kind of evolution than land based aging. Others are more cautious, saying that the chemistry remains debated, but the sensory experience is undeniably unique and certainly the storytelling. Visually, the bottles themselves become artwork. When they return to the surface, they're often covered in barnacles, shells, and marine growth. Each bottle looks like a relic pulled from a shipwreck. They taste beautiful, but the table artwork is just as fantastic. And now we get to taste what the ocean has done. Let's open and enjoy. And until next time, in wine there is truth.